I'm enthusiast of common code base in mobile apps. That's why I chose Ionic WebView. In personal life, I'm husband and father of 8 years old and 1.5-year-old boys. My mobile app project, I did a number of approaches to play with mobile app technologies. It was mostly after hours. However, I had some experience also in professional career. For the latest one, like before, I was pretty excited about Firebase. However, for latest project, I was concerned about two things. One is that Firebase is pretty proprietary technology, and the second one is that I was reading that if the app is becoming popular, then the hosting cost for Firebase is becoming pretty high. So I did some research and I chose Parse Server. Parse Server is it has been developed by a small company, then it has been acquired by Facebook, then Facebook postponed it, but open source, so now there is community edition. And I'm really excited about this technology. It's MongoDB plus Express, and it's really plug and play. For, I think, at least 4 months, I was not touching backend at all. I was just posting REST, and it worked. So it was really exciting. What I did not like is that with the Flux Redux approach, NgRx in particular for Angular, when on one side I'm very excited because NgRx is much cleaner than, for me at least, than Redux because it's very clear that you have pure functions reducers and side effects. In React, we have like different approaches. We have thunks, we have sagas. Each of them is not very like obvious how to apply it. So I was really excited about it. Still, when my project was evolving, I got more and more annoyed with the amount of boilerplate with creating action producers, handling side effects and stuff like this. A lot of repeatable code. I was trying to write some tool, but it's not very easy to make it generic. So as in my project at work, we are using GraphQL for I think more than half a year now. I decided, like at work we are using React, so it's slightly different story. Still, GraphQL and Apollo is possible to be used with Angular, so I thought that I will try it. So having I just created a separate branch and start to convert it one by one. So just to make some comparison, NgRx store. This is like a Flux implementation. So we have store, we have it's like a unidirectional pattern of interacting with user, where user is producing events. We are processing those events. We are using reducers, which are pure functions. It's not my diagram, it's stolen from the internet. And if we want to interact with the backend, then we have side effects. On one side, it's pretty cool that we have like action which is start loading some data, then we have another action for success or for error, and if we have not that many actions, then it's pretty clean. And actually, when I started with single page applications, I was thinking that the biggest challenge, it was like 10 years ago, is to manage the state of the application. Then when I met the Flux pattern, then I thought this is exactly what was required. But then I got annoyed with so much code needs to be written. So in compare with GraphQL Apollo, a lot of things are simplified. I will go quickly deeper, but in general, from the front-end side, we are just creating queries to get some data, and we can subscribe to the queries. We have also mutations to update stuff on the backend side, but we don't have to care about the state. We can just query for the state, but we don't have to manage it. Apollo client takes care of it. So as for upstate management, NgRx store, we need extra effort required to handle data relations and to keep state normalized. Like usually we have REST endpoints, and it's not that easy to handle all the relations. Also, pretty often we are relying on the internal server implementation when we have like some structure of the keys and stuff like this. And client is responsible to combine data from different sources. If we are accessing number of sources, or for example on mobile device, we wanna get like the geographic location. Good practice would be to create also like a side effect which will read from the mobile app API and then put it into NgRx store. We need to take care of all of this. In Apollo, we are using client which manages the cache on the client side and keeps data normalized. Like we are writing schema. In this schema, we have keys. If we are not specifying, usually we don't have to keys on the like nested structures. Then the client, the Apollo client, just resolve the path in the nested structures and creates like a fine-grained cache of the data it's receiving from the backend or from other sources. GraphQL schema offers to keep like client data completely independent from the server representation. On the server side, we are just implementing resolvers, which are preparing only stuff which is required by the client. Not to mention this, like I'm not sure, probably not all of you are familiarized that deep with GraphQL. We can just ask for particular stuff. So even if the schema can provide pretty complex set of fields on some entities, then on the client side we can write a query which will ask only like for two of them to present a list of like let's say name and the email. But
so it's not so difficult to contract with backend developer like now with the REST approach, when you have to
exactly
contract the source you're getting
exactly.
from.
Also, we can write queries when, for example, with an annotation, we can mark that this is like a client query, and then the Apollo client will know that we need to route this query on the client side, and we can write our own resolver on the client side. So, for example, if I would like to query for the geolocation data, and I will annotate it with like client, then it will be routed to my own like kind of middleware, but on the client side. But from the point of view on the application, it will still like. Application don't care from what's the source of the data. This is one thing. But another one, another one is that I believe one of the biggest benefits is that even if I'm so happy with the parse server, if at some point I will decide that it not scale well or I need to replace with something other, like the client is completely independent from the backend. I can switch to completely other backend. I need to just rewrite the layer with the resolvers and mutators, and I can continue with all the development. So what were the challenges? To have the first is that like I need to integrate in some way the GraphQL with the backend. Apollo is doing really good job to provide like different way of integrations, and actually I was very surprised how easy it was to integrate GraphQL with parse server. It was like just a few lines of code and 2 dependency modules to have it running. There is like a existing provider for ready parse server applications. I asked one question for them because one of the cool things with Parse Server is cloud code. So I have running instance and I can deploy to the running instance just like a small procedure, just one JavaScript file which does things for me. But here I had to install like 2 modules to be able to use GraphQL. It was possible they answered me that I can deploy together with like dependency JSON, and it was like automatically installed what I had to have it on the backend. Another challenge is that preparing data on the backend side may differ because like on the front end I have parse, I have REST, and like just JSON, I can do whatever I want with this. It may differ on the backend if I want to get it directly from the database or something. In case of Parse Server, it's just interacting with exactly the same API on the front end as on the backend, so it wasn't that difficult. There are some REST endpoints, so this is one of the challenges when I will probably keep one REST endpoint still as REST, but as with this diagram, I can cover it. So on the client side, I can make kind of a bridge when the underlying request will be for the REST data, but from the client side, it still will be just GraphQL query. So to integrate it with like Facebook authentication, I will keep like hitting the REST endpoint of the Parse server, which we will do different stuff there underlying. So I started to migrate it just call by call from like one REST endpoint one after another, and now I'm done like 80%. I think I like two endpoints has left to be converted. One thing is that, as I mentioned before, GraphQL flow differs from the Flux pattern. That we don't have to do explicit state management, but we also don't have like explicit actions. Which is kind of different. Also, one thing is that actually this is like something not related to REST directly. It's pretty common, like for example, for Firebase, that we have like real-time data. So in case of Parse server, it's called live queries, which is like WebSocket connection when like data goes back and forth. And GraphQL offers the same. We may have like if we are having like GraphQL query, then we can subscribe it to it. If we will declare a WebSocket connection, then on the backend side we can implement dynamically sending data through pipe, and on the front end side it's observable. If we subscribe to it, we will get like next versions of data that has changed. So basically, considering that those technologies are pretty different, I had some concerns how well it will go, but after all, so far I'm pretty excited. Any questions?